Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Shooting It Raw. The news I've been seeing around this week has been kind of bonkers, and it's specifically around Paul Watson and his involvement with Sea Shepherd. And it's just crazy to me the way there's this organizational drift. So Paul Watson, to me, is one of these heroes of conservation, a personal hero of mine for sure. You know, he helped co-found Greenpeace. He founded Sea Shepherd. He's been an incredibly important voice and presence in marine conservation, which to me is important. So look, back in 2020, I had the supreme privilege of speaking with Paul. It was such a treat. It was such an honor. And yeah, so please listen to this one. Share it if you can. Get people to subscribe to the podcast because, you know, the more people subscribe, the more people hear the episodes, and the happier we'll be. Okay, thanks.
For 45 years, I've always maintained that the most powerful weapon on the planet is the camera. And that's why documentation has been a very, very important part of all of Sea Shepherd's work. You know, if it's not on camera, it didn't happen. It's the camera provides evidence. It is educational, and it's also our means of self-defense. So photography is probably the most important tool in our efforts to protect the ocean.
Captain Paul Watson, thank you for joining me on Shooting It Raw. It's such an honor, and you will find out through the conversation where your influence has pushed me in my own direction, but this isn't really about me. It's about me opening doors and letting you speak and you telling your story. And what we do is we start off with photographs that you've sent over, and then we go from there. So let's just dive in. In the first photo I have, it's with your hands crossed. You're wearing a Sea Shepherd jacket with it's like a windbreaker jacket. Underneath, you're wearing a black, it could be a sweatshirt or a t-shirt, and behind you is a white background. You've got your shock of white hair. You're looking straight on into the camera. This is just a pretty no-nonsense portrait. There's just a hint of your right eyebrow kind of raised a little bit, and is it adversarial? Maybe it's adversarial. But you're kind of challenging the viewer, and you've got the logo of Sea Shepherd on your jacket. And I mean, I know who you are. I have followed you. I've been inspired by your work for all my life. And so how would you like to frame this conversation, starting with that image where you're just looking dead on at the viewer in this portrait?
I believe that photograph was taken as a promotional photo for Animal Planet's Whale Wars. And so it was a photographer that came to Australia to do that. And yes, what we're saying here really is speaking to the Japanese whalers that we're going to stand firm and steadfast in our efforts to shut down their illegal operations in the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary.
Mm-hmm. So for example, on that campaign, right, we've talked about, or you've mentioned the power of photography. That show obviously, really brought the message. Already you had a worldwide following, but that show really seemed to break it into people's consciousness even more. So in the pose of the photograph, was that from the Animal Planet or the producer who said, this is kind of what we're imagining how you're going to come off in this portrait? We're facing you. You have to deal with us. we're not going away.
Yes, I believe that they wanted a photograph that showed defiance and determination. So I gave them that pose.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, you're Canadian. I find it really interesting that there's this slice of Canadians, something about the Canadian ethos, value system, connection to the environment, whatever we call it, that, Rob Stewart, for example, was a big champion of shark conservation. And he's originally from Toronto, which is where the nearest shark is like thousands of kilometers away. I grew up in Montreal. Again, the nearest shark is probably a few thousand kilometers away. So what do you think connects Canadians to this environmental awareness and protection? Do you even think it's a thing?
I was born in Toronto, but I was raised in a fishing village in New Brunswick. And when I was young, I moved out to Vancouver, where I became one of the founding members of the Greenpeace Foundation. Now, the interesting thing about it is that the modern environmental activism movement began in Canada. It began with Greenpeace, and out of Canada also emerged the David Suzuki Foundation and Rob Stewart, as you mentioned, and so many other activists have come from Canada. Why is that? I think that in Canada that we enjoy, an incredibly natural environment in a way, more so than other countries. We see what we have, and we also realize what we could lose.
Mm.
We're close to the sea on both coasts, and I had I was fortunate enough to have experienced life both on the Atlantic and on the Pacific. But there's something there. There's something there, certainly, that motivates a lot of Canadians to become involved on a very, very active level. Not really quite sure what it is, but the reality is there. I mean, there's so many environmental activists who are Canadians. Bob Hunter, Rob Stewart, as you mentioned, Elizabeth May, David Suzuki, some Dr. Paul Spong, so many. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is something that has evolved since the late 60s, and Canada has become a birthplace for activism.
Yeah, I mean, because, for example, I remember being, growing up in Montreal, watching The Nature of Things, being inspired by David Suzuki, and then also being aware of the activist protest of actually going and getting in the way of the seal hunts in terms of those images and the forcefulness of actually not being kid glove cotton balls with the message of actually saying, fuck off. Like, no, we have to stop. Like, we have to stop on a much, much smaller scale. After being in Hong Kong for a little while, just a couple of years, I realized Hong Kong is ground zero of the shark trade. And I thought, well, if I can make a difference here, that might actually have an impact beyond. And so when I started Shark Rescue, the gold standard I had was Sea Shepherd, who says, we are actually not going to be convenient. We're not going to be polite. We're going to get in your face and we're going to say, no, stop. Why are you, what's in the ingredient of your brain? Why did it manifest in this way because Canadians are known for being very polite and very respectful of the other and all this stuff. Yet why is it that when it comes to this, there's a bravery that is so clear and attractive to people that you attract people from around the world? So can you explain why do you think you have that guts to do that, to do what you do? Because anybody who's seen the show will quickly see that you guys are just incredible.
Well, personally, I don't think Canadians are that polite. I think that's a mythology. Canadians are very outspoken, especially when they're passionate about something. Farley Mowat example is a good example. I mean, he took on the government over the wolves. He wasn't afraid to say what he meant and to say it forcefully. Mm-hmm. I believe that's sort of a really a myth. I think that Canadians are probably less fearful of their government than, say, Americans are and many Europeans.
Okay.
And that, I think, also lends a lot of strength in that. I mean, we dare to speak out against the government because, for the most part, again, it's a myth that Canadians absolutely respect their government. I don't believe that's true either.
Mm-hmm.
We do not only speak out against the government, but we physically intervene against the policies of the government, whether that be the seal hunt or logging or fish farms or fur industry or pollution, so many things that we speak out against the government. We're not afraid to do so. We don't have to worry about repressive backlash that you would see, for instance, if you're opposing, say, pipelines in the United States, and that states is far more authoritarian in that respect.
Right.
Of course, so we're also dealing with a different type of government. Bob Hunter used to describe the Canadian government as fascism with velvet gloves. In other words, it's there, but it's hidden. What's the difference between Trudeau and Donald Trump? Not much, really, except that probably Trump was more honest than Trudeau. I mean, Trudeau's the darling of the environmental movement, and yet he's pro-pipeline, pro-tar sands, pro-oil tankers, pro-seal hunt, pro all of this stuff. And yet, but he's got this reputation. So Canadians speak through that mythology and speak truth to power in that respect.
There are voices out there who will speak truth to power and who do not fear or go away from the uncomfortable conversations. And so you're one of these people who very easily, like just now, you very easily say things that I think other people might find a little bit confrontational, controversial, or upsetting. How do you feel about the fact that you may offend people in the audience?
I'm not really concerned about offending people. I mean, my clients are not people. I represent all of those species that live in the ocean, from phytoplankton to the great whales. So those are my concerns. Back in 1986, when we sank half of Iceland's whaling fleet and destroyed their whale processing plant and shut down their industry for 17 years, I was approached by a former colleague in Greenpeace who said to me, what you did in Iceland was reprehensible, unforgivable, and you're an embarrassment to the entire movement. And I said, well, so? He says, I think you should know what people think about what you did. I said, John, I don't care. Didn't sink those whaling ships for you. Didn't sink them for Greenpeace. Didn't sink them for any human being on the planet. We sank them for the whales, John. Find me one whale that disagreed with what we did, and I promise you we won't do it again.
What I like is about the clarity of your message and the forcefulness of it. And I understand that some people are going to be like, no, whoa, you're going to be a little bit like in the spectrum, you have WWF, and then you have like Friends of the Earth, and you have Greenpeace, and then you are on the side of the spectrum of PETA and other ones that I think make people feel uncomfortable. And I love how you're just like, well, who cares? I'm not here to please an audience. I'm here to make the point of, for example, saving the whales. Let's just say there's a normal distribution of people, right? So most people are going to, like, let's say 80% of the people are going to be like, well, in the middle of the road. But you need to have that 10% on the extreme that, like you and other people who are going to be very forceful and sort of clear about the message. Do you think that small population can be increased, or do you think that it will always be like a kind of a fringe notion?
The history of humanity has demonstrated that every single significant social change that has ever happened has been carried out with less than 10% of the population. The other 9% just go along. They go with the winner. Whoever triumphs, they go along with. So, whether it be the abolition of slavery or the women's rights movement, to give women the vote, to the civil rights movement, all of these things were carried out by a minority of very outspoken and activists. And every single revolution in history has been the same. As Margaret Mead once said, don't expect governments or corporations to solve any social problem. They never have, and they never will. Governments cause problems. They don't solve problems. All change comes through the passion of individuals, the passion, the courage, and the imagination of individuals or groups of individuals. That's what makes change. So I think it's my duty as a conservationist to rock the boat, to piss people off, to make them think. I'm not really concerned about what people think about me. As I think it was Oscar Wilde said, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. We're here to provoke thought.
Yeah.
And we do that through action.
So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.